You work all day, right? You switch tabs, you constantly check your phone, and by the evening, you're just totally physically exhausted, but also kind of empty. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're not just looking at distraction as some bad habit you need to break. No, we're treating it like a pathogen, a literal biophysical drain that's actively attacking your mind. So, let's diagnose this cognitive epidemic.
So, the dark reality of a distracted mind really begins with a single haunting symptom. Why on earth does your brain feel like it's just bleeding energy even when your body literally hasn't moved from your desk? Well, the answer actually lies in a pretty chilling diagnostic metric. 8 seconds. That is it. That is our fundamental capacity to focus right now. Since the year 2000, the average human attention span has completely plummeted to the point where it's actually below that of a goldfish. Crazy, right? You aren't just being lazy. Your brain is actively being reprogrammed. It's being hardwired for shallow, fragmented survival. Which brings us to part 1, the anatomy of attention residue.
Think about what happens when you switch from writing an unfinished email to quickly checking a Slack message. Your brain doesn't just cleanly transition. Researcher Sophie Leroy actually documented this fallout, and she found it leaves a heavy cognitive tax anchored to that previous task. You are essentially dragging the dead weight of unprocessed information into every single new interaction you have.
And this residue triggers what's called the Zeigarnik effect. It's basically a biophysical tension system. Your brain keeps those unfinished tasks screaming in the background of your working memory, like a continuous, silent alarm. And the clinical result of this? A staggering 40% loss in productivity and cognitive capacity. It is literally bleeding your executive function dry.
Now, this isn't just a mental thing, it's actually structural. A chronically distracted brain physically mutates. It actively weakens your prefrontal cortex, which is your center of focus, and dangerously enlarges your amygdala, making you incredibly reactive. But the good news is, the reverse is also true. Deep, sustained focus actually physically thickens your cortical pathways. You are literally building biological armor. All right, let's move into part 2, the AI atrophy threat. A recent study revealed a stark and honestly terrifying biological divide. Older professionals are generally using generative AI to offload tasks they already know how to perform. But younger professionals, especially those under 25, they're offloading the actual thinking process itself. They're delegating cognitive tasks they've never actually learned to do, and the result of that is permanent cognitive foreclosure. And we're seeing the clinical symptoms accelerate rapidly. We're talking failed conceptual quizzes, a total inability to debug their own work, and serious declines in memory retention. See, delegating our minds to algorithms creates this passive surrender. We're actively losing our divergent thinking. In a way, we're eroding a core part of our cognitive humanity. But there is a way out. Part 3, rewiring through deep work. The cure does exist, and it totally relies on the biological miracle of neuroplasticity. The exact mechanism here is called myelination. When you focus intensely, I mean in absolute isolation, these specialized cells called oligodendrocytes physically wrap your active neural circuits in protective lipid layers. You are literally building biological superhighways in your brain. Temporary cognitive effort cements into permanent structural brilliance. Basically, deep work forces a neurological war inside your head. It trains your dorsal attention network, which is your top-down voluntary focus, to fight off the ventral system. Now, the ventral network is like your brain's circuit breaker. It is absolutely desperate to react to every ping, every new email, every tiny environmental threat. You literally have to train the dorsal network to win that war. But look, to survive unavoidable interruptions without bleeding out your focus, you need a tourniquet. And that is this 30-second clinical intervention, the ready to resume protocol. When you get interrupted, you just do this. Stop mid-task, note exactly where you left off, and list out the immediate intended next action. By marking your place like this, you give your prefrontal cortex permission to safely disengage. The bleeding stops. Moving on to part 4, prescribing your focus philosophy. You absolutely have to choose a structure to protect your cognitive reserves. You've got the monastic isolation or bimodal splitting. But honestly, for most people, the real lifesaver is the rhythmic philosophy. This means scheduling 90-minute blocks of deep work at consistent times every single day. Doing it this way lowers that massive friction of starting and builds a permanent life-saving habit. And finally, part 5, catering to neurodivergence. Because what if your brain's attentional topology just operates differently?
What if your focus is like a high-powered fire hose driven by ADHD? Well, you don't need sheer willpower, you need specialized valves. Consider body doubling. Working silently alongside others leverages positive social pressure and dopaminergic design. It literally delays those impulsive attention shifts and safely anchors the neurodivergent mind.
So to bypass that massive friction of simply starting a task, we use precise clinical interventions. Things like task shrinking, which is breaking a job down into micro steps until it totally bypasses the amygdala's threat response. Or using tactile visual boards, sequential alarms, and sensory rituals. These specific tools allow neurodivergent minds to safely bypass activation friction and channel what is actually their ultimate superpower, hyperfocus. Now, to heal completely each day, you have to systematically discharge all remaining cognitive tension at the end of the day. You do this by closing the loops, update your task lists, review tomorrow's calendar. And then, and this sounds crazy but it works, physically speak the phrase out loud, shut down complete. This auditory cue signals straight to your nervous system that it is finally safe to rest. So as we wrap up this explainer, remember this. In a world that is actively engineered to distract you and drain your executive function, cultivating deep work is your absolute best defense. It is the ultimate cognitive medicine. Really, it's the only way to preserve the sacred space of your mind. And I'll leave you with this one final provocative thought. Your brain constructs its physical reality based entirely on what you choose to pay attention to. If focus is the literal fabric of your lived experience, what reality will you build tomorrow?